Washington. Yeah, when we connect. I'm not sure that, okay, AT, all right. I'm like, we in Washington. When we connect. We win. When we connect. We win. It is good to be here, and it is good to see you. One of the Inatai team members asked me how I was feeling, and there is a somewhat of a sense of being overwhelmed. I feel like you are also experiencing this, that I feel the weight of the moment, and I feel the weight of the room that we are in, and I feel the weight of the thing that calls us to this place. So many of us, the communities and the people that we love most deeply, are standing, as Howard Thurman says, with their backs against the wall. And it is the hope that we can do something together that repositions them, that repositions our communities. It is that hope that brings us to this place. And so I feel that. I feel that deeply. I love long train rides because I feel like y'all just love me, so cheer. Yeah, I love long train rides because there's so much that we don't get to complete in this work, in this life. And there's something about getting on the train from New Orleans to Chicago. And you're like, it's gonna be 20 hours. And then you get there and you're like, yo, we did that. And so I'm feeling some of that as well with this journey, that we have been in the Shaping the Future work together now for about 3 years. And so to bear witness to this is so deeply exciting. And to meet you in the hallways and for folks to be like, yo, what up, Keron? Like, that feels really good. We are really building something, aren't we? When we connect, when we connect, all right, so we're going to be talking about power. My folks started coming to America probably 30, 40 years ago. And in my family group chat, there are those of us who have naturalized. There are undocumented folks, there are folks in process, all the things. And when I participate in that chat, I'm reminded about the crushing feeling of the current political climate. And increasingly, our communities feel like we are being pushed against a wall. And the political context seems to be shifting. And yes, we are no strangers to struggle and fighting and campaigns. But something feels a little different about this moment. Do you feel that? Raise your hand if you're like, something feels different. And so the political context is shifting all around us. And our communities are even more hungry than they have been previously for some space, for some freedom, for some cheaper gas, for no more war, right? And so it is important for me to start with the context, because what we are up against is what calls out to us around this question of what it means to be powerful and why it is we are so committed to building power. This is not the kind of political context where asking nicely is going to get us what we want. We are no longer in a political moment where simply being polite is enough. right? Or maybe it is. I don't know, right? That's not the context. And so the power building conversation always starts with us getting on the same place, the same page around where we are in terms of our context. So that's the context we're in. Our communities are being pushed. It's not enough to be nice. We're not just gonna get what we want by asking kindly, right? Our sovereignty is not going to be respected simply because we raise our hands and say, what about us? Our immigrant brothers and sisters are not going to have pathways to liberation simply by asking. Black bodies are not going to be free simply by being nice, right? Simply by showing up. The bodies of our women folk are not going to be respected simply because we said, hey, what about us? That's the context, right? And so that is what brings us to this conversation, to this work about power. And what do we mean exactly by power, right? It is the strength to turn vision into reality. It is not vision. It is the strength to turn vision into reality. I've spent a lot of time visioning. In fact, one of the great failures of my organizing work was building a tenants union in New Orleans where we spent almost 2 years in a room, 3500 Canal Street, visioning. And we wanted to get the right language, and we wanted to make sure everybody was included, and we had the right framing, but we had no strength. We built no strength. We clarified the vision, we workshopped the vision, we tested the vision, but we had no strength. And so power is the strength to turn your vision into reality. Has anybody spent more time than you should working on vision and not building strength? I see you, right? I appreciate you being like, girl, yes, I have. Then you're in the right room, because we've all been there, right? So power is the strength to turn your vision into reality. It is the organized energy, and we're going to get to what we mean by organized, right? It is the pulling together of your people, your resources to make demands that cannot be ignored, right? That is what we mean by power. I like this crowd. So, what do we do with all that power? We've been on this ride together for a little bit. How many folks have been to Shaping the more of you, yeah, come on. You've been to a Shaping the Future gathering. So why are we building power? We're trying to move policymakers in our direction. We're trying to get city councils. We're trying to get school boards. We're trying to get county commissions. We're trying to get state legislatures. We're trying to get the federal government to move policy in the direction of our people. That's it. Right? So when people ask, why are we knocking doors? Why are we talking to people? Why are we going to these conferences? Why are we paying staff to do X, Y, Z? It is because we are trying to get policymakers to move in our direction. Power gets businesses and corporations to do right by our communities. It is what we witnessed with the Target boycott, right? It is what we witnessed with McDonald's workers going on strike. It is what we've witnessed with us trying to push Walmart, right? It is about corporations. It is what people are doing to ensure that as we expand our AI capacities, that we are doing right by our communities. Right? Because business interests are not always a liberatory interest. And so we understand that, again, saying, yo, you can't just build this plant in my community and being right about that is not enough. The moral argument doesn't always win. Right? So power allows us to pose a legitimate threat to those who stand against the well-being of our communities. And we can no longer be shy about doing that kind of work. Power is what makes stubborn people get out the freaking way. And all I'm doing, I'm just defining what we're trying to do, right? So some people say, why we talk why all this talk about power? Why is Inner so concerned with? Because there are anybody know some stubborn people that you're like, we got to get them on up out of here. So power allows us to do that. That is the strength, right? That is the strength to turn our vision into reality. Influence, there are times I think of myself as an influencer. Not really. I got like 200 followers. Influence is not power, right? Influence gets you so far. Influence might get you a seat at the table. Anybody been at the table and not been significant enough to move the table? Well, I'm just talking about me. I have been at the table. I've had a seat at the table. I've been served coffee at the table, and the stuff I said made no difference. And so we are not just contesting for influence, right? We're not just contesting to be heard. We are contesting for the liberation of our people and our communities. We are contesting for our people to be free. We are contesting for the freaking basic rights of our people to be respected. That is why we want to be at the table. And so be a problem, right? Be inconvenient. Disrupt some stuff. Well, maybe not everything, but right? That being polite and getting along just because. But here's the thing about power. Being the sole voice, right? That's cute, but that's not power. Showing up alone and being like, well, I'm going to make a scene. That's not power. I live off Old National Highway, close to Greg. Hey, Greg. And Old Nat, what up? Talking about the other side here. Every day, I see these two people standing outside of a clinic, and they have a sign. And I go, I wish they would understand organizing. Because you standing out here with your sign is doing absolutely nothing. Right? And so sometimes we go, I'm just going to be right, and I'm going to be moral, and I'm going to stage my own little protest. That is not power. Right? Power is the extent to which we are bringing more and more people into our work, into our organization. Right? Power is the extent to which we are getting more and more people to say yes to us. And so if your organization, if your work had 20 people last year, and we still have 20 people today, maybe you're not quite building power. I know. They say, I'm going to hold your hand when I say that, right? I'm going to hold. I'm not saying it's easy, right? I'm not saying it's easy. But if we're not seeing more and more people come into our work, more and more people say yes, if we're not seeing growth in our base, then we're doing something. It might be good stuff, but we're not quite building power, right? Because power is what? Strength to turn vision into reality. And strength is what? Our strength is in organized people, right? And how do we know that people are organized? They share purpose, they have a common identity, they have a shared analysis, they take collective action. Now, people from all over the city, the state, the county, different walks of life, different experiences, that they are organized when there is a shared understanding of what's going on. And they are organized when we can call them to take action. Working with a group, I won't say where, to plan a lobby day. They set a goal. They say, Keron, help us. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. We get to the deadline. They have a list. No one registers. Well, 7 people register. Forgive that. 7 people register. And I say to them, what does that tell you about the list you have and the relationships you've built? And I was like, they're not organized. because they won't respond when you call them to take action, right? That is a test that people are organized. If you say, yo, something is going on, let's show up, will they come, right? Not as a favor, but because the stuff you're working on speaks to their lives and their experience, right? New Orleans, Louisiana, folks, undocumented day laborers, right? Coming in, it's the boss, it's the individual employer that's a problem. Through the organizing, they come to understand that the city has a particular approach to undocumented workers, and their analysis shifts, and now they're talking about the city, and they're like, we've got to make the city do something differently, right? Shifting analysis, a shared language. That is how we know that people are organized, right? We can also organize money, right? We can organize individuals to give money to our organizations. We can organize philanthropy. And organizing is not just pitching. It is bringing people in. It is inviting them to the table. It is saying, how do we partner together on a thing that advances all of our interests? That is the work of organizing. It's understanding what animates people, right? It's training them up and getting them to move as a collective. It is disciplined work. It is hard work, right? And it is not always for the weak. But we go back to where we started. If we agree that our communities are standing now with their backs against the wall, this is the moment to organize. When I came to this work, one of the things that we said was we build power after we've gotten a couple no's, because the work is challenging. You got to talk to strangers. I don't like talking to, I got to go to places I don't want to go. I got to be uncomfortable. And so I'm not saying we organize because we're bored. I'm not saying we organize because we got nothing else to do, right? And so if there are things that you can win by not having to talk to strangers, by all means, baby, go win it. Right? If there are things that you can get elected officials to do that require you to just knock on their doors and make a phone call, by all means. But so much of what we want is going to require more than that. And that is why we organize. Because the forces that stand against us are stubborn, and they are as committed as we are to their vision. So when we say we're organizing, we're bringing people together, shared language, shared analysis, with the explicit aim of taking action together that forces the will of electeds, that forces the will of businesses and corporations in our direction. We've been doing a lot of talk about power. And so power building groups, if you're like, yo, we are trying to build some power, we know the scale is going to be different, the methodologies might be different, your entry point might be different, but there are some things. Come to the workshop after this. Don't forget your workbook. We're going to dig into this. But when we think about power building groups, there is a discipline about bringing people in. Right? You don't have to say we're going to recruit 5,000 people this year, though that would be nice. But having a discipline around we are in community, we are talking to people, we are growing steadily over time with some direction, that is a part of what it means to build power. And any group claiming to build power must have some mechanism by which they are doing this. So how are you bringing people in? Right? Taking action, right? That is how we demonstrate the power that we have, right? Again, undocumented folks in New Orleans, we're going to meet with legislators. And I'm like, yo, are you afraid? They're like, no, we're not, because why? There are too many of us for them to do anything, right? So collective action taking is necessary. When you take action, you might get a no, but the action taken is part of the process. And you demystify, right? Oh my God, the legislature, the county, oh my God, they're so far away. And you show up with your people and you're like, oh, this is not as bad as we thought it was, right? So power building groups are recruiting people, taking action, right? Folks are also joining coalitions because we realize that we might need more power. And so we're doing statewide coalition, countywide coalitions. We're getting other organizations to join with us. Some of the biggest fights I've worked on would not have been possible without coalition work. And so there's a session today and tomorrow that talks about organizational leadership, because a part of what makes coalitions work is the kind of leader that you decide to be. Can folks work with you? Will folks work with you? Because if folks won't work with you, you're going to have a hard time building power. I'm going to leave that to the other session. And then power building groups have a base. Not just a list, but a set of people who are like, those are my people. I'm part of that organization. You claim them, they claim you. That is a necessary component. Again, the size, the scope, how many, that is determined by the vision that you have. But I work with too many groups who have big vision and little power. And I'm like, baby, what you gonna do with 10 people? And I've been there, so, okay, right. Keron, what you gonna do with, right? I've been there, right? But we have a really big vision and we lack the discipline to recruit people in to build the necessary power to make the vision real. And if we want the Washington that we're talking about, then we cannot keep doing that. So then we get to this idea of constellations. And when you look around the room, this is the constellation. That there are many of us, there are lots of us, we're doing all kinds of things, but how do we be aware of what our strengths are, what the strength of other organizations are, what it means for us to partner together, right? What it means for us to build a coalition that can move in different ways with different entry points, different styles and approaches, but we have a shared goal of building power so our people can be free. When we connect, and so Constellations is about that kind of winning connection. So however you do the work, do not forget that in this moment, having power to move stubborn people is a necessary component. We cannot ask nicely, right? Again, if you can, go ahead. But the stuff that I've heard that we're trying to win, it's going to require us to be able to say, if you don't do the thing our community needs, there will be political consequences. You're not going to be the representative. You're not going to be the head of this corporation. Right? And so here's the thing. I know a place starts to feel like home when you walk into a conference and people are like, hey, Keron, how are you? And I'm like, so I've had that experience a lot over the last couple days. And so this is beginning to feel like home. And so I know a bunch of the groups, and I know that we're doing different things. We have different approaches. But I want to propose that wherever we are, whatever your actual orientation is as an organization, there is some way to be doing the kind of power building work we're talking about. So if you're mainly a service provider, right, you might be building power by ensuring that folks are educated about the root causes. You might be building power by sitting at a coalition where groups that are doing organizing and base building are leading a campaign, right? If you are a support group or mutual aid, same thing. You might be building power by ensuring that your folks understand root cause. You're sharpening analysis, right? You're finding moments to take action together. That, yes, I'm going to make sure that Brenda is all right because that's our orientation, but we can't ignore that Brenda is dealing with what she's dealing with because there are some laws that we need to shift. And we can't convince ourselves that we're going to mutual aid our way out of some of these systemic challenges. And so how do we position ourselves alongside power building ecosystems that allow us to go farther and reach more people? Right? So wherever you are in this sort of constellation, there is a place for you in the work of power building. Here's a diagram. That's sort of, all right, that's a good one. That helps us understand that the orientation is around building power together. I am not letting any organization off the hook. So there's no, well, we don't build power. You're in the wrong room. You're doing the wrong work, right? And again, it may look different. But if you walk up to me after and say, Keron, I can get the stuff my community needs simply by asking. And I'll be like, you win, baby. But Black liberation, police accountability, immigration reform, good education, affordable housing, hell, gas that's affordable, right? And it is within reach. Look around the room. Every organization, every person represents tens, hundreds, thousands of people. What we are capable of doing together as a power-building constellation is actually imaginable in an unimaginable way. Like the possibilities really open up when we think about what we can do together if we are building power together. And if we have an orientation that says, wherever we start and wherever we are, we've got to be getting to how we're bringing more and more people in to shift the systems that oppress our people. That is the work that we're doing together. When we connect, we win. So we got to get serious about power. This journey of shaping the future, this meeting, this conference that we're having over these next couple of days is about interrogating how serious are we going to be? How serious is your answer to the call that however we do it, we've got to build the power to move stubborn people and stubborn institutions? How serious are you that we've got to get folks out the way who are committed to our people not being free? How serious, right? And so a part of how we get serious is by one, understanding your role in your ecosystem. Whatever that role is. What is your organization doing? What is your contribution? How does that contribution stack up against the contributions of others? And what does that produce? What becomes possible because we are building together? Then you've got to define your people. And you're going to hear this a lot from me. The list is not enough. These many people follow us on social. That's not your people. Your people got to claim you, and you got to claim them, right? They got to know somebody in the. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we getting serious about power. Then we got to work on stuff that is responsive to community. I've planned actions where people didn't show up. And our impulse is to say, oh, these people don't care. And then we go, maybe you chose the wrong thing. People care all the time. If you're in Atlanta, people show up to the Bulldog all the time. Hey, what up, right? People hang out all the time. People give money all the time. My best friend is a pastor of a church in Virginia, and I go, yo, how do you maintain this? He's like, we have 5,000 people who give every week. Poor people. So when we say, people give, people show up. If they're not showing up for what we are putting out, it might mean that we're not working on stuff that's responsive to what community needs. I do a lot of electoral work, and I say I never put the blame at the feet of the electorate. It is the campaign. It's the issues. It's not the electorate, right? So we got to work on stuff that people say they want to work on. The stuff that keeps them up at night, the stuff that makes them want to take a half day off work to go to the Capitol, the stuff that makes them want to give $7 a month. And when people say no, it is sometimes because the stuff does not meet the muster. Then we've got to develop leaders, right? We got to make sure that whatever your transition plan, there are folks who are capable of leading if you're not around. I get an email probably every couple of weeks from the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools. I was the national director 6 years ago, and every time I get that email, I smile because we built a thing that, though I am a good leader, can last. And folks are still doing education work even though I've moved on to do other things. So how are we ensuring that we are developing people in community to lead and to drive the work? We got to take action, small or big, infrequent or frequent, but we got to confront power. And then we got to build the right relationships. And we're going to talk more about that. That is what it looks like to be serious about power. And we're not just trying to get power because we're bored, but our people need it. The weight of what our people need rests on us. And people are looking to us and they're like, you cannot fail. You cannot screw this up. And that is what we're doing together. When we connect,